Hi there everyone. Welcome to Fingers, Fums and Fits. And in today's episode of Titty Piddle I'll be painting the Imperial Assassins from ASSASSINORUM Execution Force. Can I keep the paint inside the lines? Let's find out. I'm sure you all know what Imperial Assassins look like, but here are the 4 models I'll be painting. And to begin with, we'll start with the Assassin's Synskin, before painting the unique parts of each model. So, to paint the Synskin, let's use the Callidus Assassin as the example. To begin with, I'd like to apologize about the improvised background. I've never really painted anything jet black so far, and didn't have a suitable backdrop. But anyway, I started with a spray of Chaos Black, followed by a base coat of Abaddon Black. I then gave the model an all-over wash of Nuln Oil. This applied a shade to all the recesses, but also accentuated where the natural highlights fall. And when the wash was dry, it was time to apply those highlights. First off, starting with Dark Reaper. And then a slighter smaller highlight of Thunderhawk Blue. Followed by a literal spot highlight of Fenrisian Grey. And that's the basic recipe for Synskin. Now, onto the assassins themselves. And as we are using the Callidus Assassin as an example, let's start with her. And we'll be starting with her phase sword blade, which got a coat of Caliban green. And then used a 2-to-1 mix of Lamian medium and Warpstone glow to layer over parts of the sword 3 or 4 times, with each layer smaller than the last. I painted the left-hand side of the blade closest to the tip, to about halfway down, and the right-hand side from halfway down to the base. And then gave the blade an edge highlight with Warpstone glow, Moot green, and Aerial yellow, again with each highlight being smaller than the last. Moving on from the sword now, I painted her hair and eyes with Mephiston red. Before applying washes of Basilicanum Grey and Nuln Oil respectively. After these washes were dry, I highlighted the hair using a dry brush first of Mephiston red, then a slightly lighter dry brush of Evil Sun Scarlet, before applying a thin highlight of Fire Dragon Bright. I also layered the Evil Sun Scarlet onto her eyes too. Now, back to her weapons. I painted her phase sword's wrist mounting with Screaming Bell, before giving it a wash with Gullyman Flesh. It was then lightly dry brushed with Balthasar Gold, before getting a highlight of Stormhost Silver. And for the glowing parts of her Neural Shredder, I first painted it Caliban green, before applying a Warpstone glow accent. I then washed it with Dark Angels green, and highlighted it with Moot green. And finally, I painted any remaining metallic areas, including her hair tie, belt buckle, gun casing, and the cables on her arms. These areas were first painted with Lead Belcher, before getting a Nuln Oil wash. And were then lightly dry brushed back with Lead Belcher, before getting a highlight of Stormhost Silver. All that was left was to base the model, which I did firstly with Astro Granite, before applying a heavyish wash of Basilicanum Grey. I then dry brushed with Dawnstone, followed by a lighter dry brush of Administratum Grey. And there we have it, one Callidus Assassin. Now, on to the next. So, the Vindicare Assassin, Victor Zhao. And I'm going to begin by painting the stone pillar he's standing next to, starting with a base of Dawnstone, which I then washed with Basilicanum Grey. Before employing a technique I don't often use, stippling. So I got an old dry brush, and stippled Dawnstone, followed by Administratum Grey. This was then given a light dry brush of Grey Seer. Before painting the metallic details, the rebar was painted with Screaming Bell, and the Aquila was painted with Retributor Armor. Both areas were then washed with Gullyman Flesh, before getting a highlight of Stormhost Silver. Now I think we can move on to the assassin himself, starting with his stealth mask. Here I used Corax White, Evil Sun Scarlet and Lead Belcher as the base color, before applying a wash of Griff Charger Grey, and highlighting with Corax White and Stormhost Silver. but I think we should now focus on the main part of this model, Victor's Exodus rifle. So this got an all-over coat of lead belcher. And then got a wash of Griff Charger Grey, to give it a kinda cold steel look. The rifle casing was then painted with Eshin Grey, before getting edge highlights of Dawnstone and Administratum Grey. Then washed with Achillean Green, which when dry, itself got a small highlight of Fenrisian Grey. I then painted a couple of elements with Screaming Bell, and the Aquila with Retributor Armor, before washing these areas with Gullyman Flesh. Before giving all the metallic areas on the rifle the prerequisite edge highlight with Stormhost Silver. Moving away from his rifle now, it's time to paint the various adornments on his bodysuit. First with lead belcher, then washed with Griff Charger Grey, and highlighted with Stormhost Silver. I painted the tassel on his knife with Screamer Pink, added some shade with Caraberg Crimson, and highlighted with Pink Horror. And the final thing on the model was to paint all of his straps, which were first painted with Rhinox Hide, washed with Snakebite Leather, and then highlighted with Doombull Brown. And after basing this model in a similar way to our Callidus Assassin, I think we can call this one complete as well. Halfway done. Now, let's keep it going and move on to the next. Our third assassin is Noctis Cord from the incredibly sinister Culexus Temple. And I started painting this model forgetting I was making a video, so we start a few steps in. Here, I painted the helmet portion of the Animus Speculum with Ushab T-Bone before washing it with Skeleton Horde. I then also painted the metallic bits with Screaming Skull, before applying a wash of Gulliman Flesh. The lens of the Animus was painted with Ushab T-Bone, before getting a layer of striking Scorpion Green. And whilst this was drying, I picked out some sections with Abaddon Black. I then mixed 2 parts water to 1 part striking Scorpion Green, and dropped this into the grooves on the Animus Speculum. I waited for that to dry, and then did it again. This was then repeated once with Tesseract Glow, but the water mix was 1:1. Now, for a bit of variety, I painted the vents on the Animus with lead belcher, and then washed them with Nuln Oil. I also did this to the nodules on his backpack. Now, time for a bit of highlighting. The copper areas got a slight highlight of Balthasar Gold, whilst the silver areas were done with Stormhost Silver. And because they remind me a bit of old vacuum tubes there for a kinda power source, I painted those nodules on his backpack with Tesseract Glow. The accessories attached to his body were painted in a similar fashion to the Animus Speculum, and I painted any straps with a similar method to the Vindicare. So all I had left was to base the model, and you should know the process by now. However, I laid the Astrogranite on a lot thicker and haphazardly, as there was no detail on the base. And with that done, we're on to our final assassin, and the one I was least looking forward to. And I'll start by saying I painted his skull mask in the same way I painted that section of the Culexus Assassin. I then painted the accented parts of his bodysuit with Mephiston Red, which were then washed with Seraphim Sepia, before getting an Evil Sun Scarlet highlight. I then also painted the metallic sections with lead belcher. These areas were washed with Nuln Oil, and then highlighted with Stormhost Silver. I'm now going to group a load of random bits together, just to make this a little shorter. I painted his sword wrap and sheath with Scrag Brown, the chemical vats on his pistol and gauntlet with Death Guard Green, and the light stroke scanner thing on his shoulder with Ushab T-Bone. This was followed up with Retributor Armor for the winged skull on his pistol, and Screaming Bell for his backpack detail. And to shade these areas, I used Beal Tan Green on the chemical vats, Gullyman Flesh for the gold, copper and brown areas, and Frostheart on that scanner/lamp thing. And for the highlights, I used Stormhost Silver on the gold and copper areas, Rakarth Flesh for the brown, and Auric Flesh for the chemical. The straps and pouches were painted in a similar fashion to the previous assassins, and then it was time to base. And this confused me a little, as I wasn't sure what in the Emperor's name this scenic piece was supposed to be. It looks a little like a door, official models have it painted like a wall, it has pipes and rebar. So I painted it similarly to the Vindicare Assassin scenic element, just with a few more metallic bits. I was then able to base using Astrogranite, in the same way as the previous models. And there we have it. All 4 assassins from the Assassinorum Execution Force game painted and ready to go. So, what do we think? Did I manage to keep the paint inside the lines? Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again for the next one. Have a great day everyone, and I'll see you later.